The YouTuber TrueGreen7 has a series where he gives famous people... Well, he's a PokeTuber, and you are literally watching footage from one of his videos right now. The point being, I decided to do this with Persona characters. Also, this video will contain spoilers. For some characters have them, others don't. There will be a little spoiler gauge in the top right corner, as well as timestamps to skip to the next character. So first up, one of my favorite protagonists in all of video games, Joker. Final boss spoilers for the base game. The first Pokemon I decided to give him, and his ace, Yveltal. I think it does a really good job in its design and general vibe representing Arsene. Next up, what better to give the Persona user that can use any Persona than the Pokemon that can become any Pokemon? Yeah, it's Ditto. Next up is the Pokemon that literally made me have to add a spoiler warning, Giratina. It's here to represent Satanile. What better to give Joker's Persona that's literally just supposed to be Satan than Pokemon Satan? Next up, I chose Obstagoon. There isn't really a reason, but the color palette kind of just fits well for Joker, and it's a Pokemon that I think would fit quite well on his team. I don't really have a reason past that. Next up is Incineroar. Fun fact, this was originally going to be our shoo-in for Arsene, with Yveltal being Raoul. But I think the card plays better for Yveltal being Arsene, and technically Raoul isn't an official Persona Joker has. It was meant to be, but it isn't. But I still decided to keep Incineroar because it has the same color palette as Arsene and Raoul. Lastly, but certainly not least, Poltegeist. It's here to represent LeBlanc, and also works for Sojiro, since it's essentially Joker's new home and his adoptive father. So, I think it worked quite well. Next up is the cat of the hour, Morgana. So, let's go. Next up is Pangoro to represent his main persona, Zoro. I don't know, they just kind of look similar and just have that kind of vibe. The next two are being covered together since they're Luxray and Skitty, and have the exact same reason. They're cats. Look, I think it would be kind of funny to give the guy who is insistent that he's not a cat a team that is almost entirely consistent of cats. Which may then make you wonder where another Pokemon is, but we'll get to that in a second. Corviknight is here for reasons. It's a spoiler, so I'm not going to say, but Corviknight itself would not give away the spoiler. If you know, you know. Alright, since it has now been a second, we're here with Meowscarada, the magician cat Pokemon that looks like a Phantom Thief. Look, one of the Phantom Thieves had to have it. Morgana gets it because it's a cat. But frankly, I could have put this on every character's team, but it felt like a bit of a cop-out. So, if you're not happy with a Pokemon that one of the Phantom Thieves gets, replace it with Meowscarada! Next up, Skull, who has a very interesting team. I gave him one that it fits him really well, but also I feel like half of these Pokemon you would not assume he would use. Just like everyone else so far, he has been giving a Pokemon to fit his persona. That being Delmise for Captain Kit. Pirate ship anchor. It kind of fit. Next up being Tornadus to represent his true awakening persona. I really don't have much more to say. If you know what it looks like, it fits really well. Also, wanted to give him at least one electric type Pokemon. Of course, what better to give the person who literally has the nickname Vulgar Boy than the one Pokemon that can curse. Yeah, Chatot's just a funny addition, because you can make it curse. I just think it's a funny little way to include Ryuji's personality in there. Of course, we give Skull the Pokemon with a skull, and in addition, he also has a Voltorb, just because it's one of the fastest Pokemon out there, and he used to be a track team runner. Lastly, Goldango, to reference one of my favorite moments in Persona 5 Strikers, where Ryuji orders a gold bar on Amazon. Next up is On, someone who is pretty much the first party member that I kept the entirety of the game because, well, she's really useful. Anyway, the first Pokemon she gets is Delphox to represent her persona, Carmen. The first shiny of this video is, of course, Liepard. Look at it. It's a leopard, which is pretty close to a panther, and its shiny is red. Just saying. It's way too perfect to not throw on here. I don't see Anne hunting for a shiny, but I don't know, maybe she encountered it by luck or was gifted it by Futaba or something. Anyway, next up is Skeledirge, which my notes say is for her ability, Crocodile Tears. Sure. I think she's like the only one to get something based on a Confidant skill. Next up is Salazzle. It's another one that kind of fits the general vibe of Anne's team, and in addition, kind of reminds me of some of her evolved personas with how it treats Salandits. I don't really know how to explain this. Next is the first one to be based on their Arcana, Mousehold, to represent the lovers. You know, because it's a little pair of mice that have a child. They're lovers. And you could pull references to the one Disney princess movie where, like, a mouse make fashion. She's a model. I don't know. You could pull reference to that too. I don't even know what the film's called, so I'm not very helpful and I don't feel like Googling it. And lastly, the fire-type form of Oricorio. It just has the general aesthetic again. It was that or a Pokemon I would prefer to not acknowledge on this channel. Next on the chopping block is the really eccentric Yusuke, aka Fox. First up is King Gambit to represent Goemon. It's also one of the only Pokemon here that really represent anything about him. About half of them are just fun little decisions I think he would choose to use. Next up, Quaquaval. It fits his general vibe. It could also be used as one of his personas, but I don't know. I just don't really see myself not giving him Quaquaval because it fits so well. Next up being Smeargle, since, well, he's an artist. I'm giving him the painting Pokemon. And also, weirdly enough, this means he actually so far has a really solid team of pretty much competitively viable Pokemon if they are not already. Because I know Smeargle was competitive in most games. And I'm pretty sure King Gambit is, and Quaquaval is really good. Next up, another Social Link based Pokemon, Empoleon. If you're not aware, his Arcana is Emperor. I think I don't need to explain why I gave him Empoleon. I'm covering these next two together because of how similar they are. Ninetales and that one Galarian fossil. I honestly don't remember any other names. They're more just there because they fit the general vibe and aesthetic I could see Yusuke using. So they're here. That's it. That's all the reason I have. Next up is Makoto. The spoilers only go up to the 6th palace's beginning. Of course, I had to give her something to represent Johanna, and what better than the literal bike electrical lizard Pokemon? Yeah, it's Miraidon. I was at least gonna pick a Pokemon that's considered a ride Pokemon, which are basically HM equivalents for Sun and Moon, Legends, and then these two are a bit asterisk-y, but I'm counting them. So yeah, Miraidon! And of course I gave Queen Nidoqueen. And the Growlithe line are the equivalent to police dogs in the Pokemon universe. So what better to give someone that wants to become a police officer than the police dog? Since Makoto's the brains of the Phantom Thieves, I decided to give her an Alakazam. You know, since it's super smart. I also gave her a Dragonite, which is evolved from the Dratini you can get at the casino in Pokemon Red and Blue, to represent the fact that her sister's palace is a literal casino. And lastly, I wanted to give Miss Student Council President a Pokemon that another Student Council President in the Pokemon world uses. So I decided to give her another doggo, that being Lycanroc, to represent Nemona, the Pokemon Scarlet and Violet Student Council President. Next up, my personal favorite Phantom Thief, Futaba Sakura. First up is Gigantamax Orbeetle, specifically a shiny one to represent her persona Necronomicon. You'll also soon notice a theme. Next up is a shiny Cofagrius to represent the general vibe of her own palace, that of course being, you know, a pyramid. The Egyptian coffin, pyramid, it makes sense. Next up being a shiny Porygon Z to represent her time as the only and founding member of Medjed. Does it surprise you that this next one's shiny? Because it's a shiny Luxray. Generally kind of just to represent sphinxes and more stuff that fits in kind of an Egyptian pyramid vibe. Because again, sphinxes, it's, I assume, based on a sphinx? Its pre-evolution is called Shinx. Next up is a shiny Metagross. Since, what better to give the hacker than the literal supercomputer Pokemon? I mean, it's not technically a supercomputer, but it's described like one. And lastly, a shiny Poltegeist to represent LeBlanc. Yeah, I know, another duplicate Pokemon, but the duplicate's because it's the same representation. And it fits. But this time it's shiny. And if you're wondering why she has so many shinies, she either packed them in or is a shiny hunter, which I could see being the case. Either way, she got them through some means. And of course, lastly, there is Haru. Now, if you're wondering why I'm saying lastly, I've just decided to do the core Phantom Thieves. This video is taking forever to make, and is also the reason there wasn't a video last week. So, you're not getting the additional Phantom Thieves from Royal or Strikers. First up is Gardevoir to represent her main persona, Melanie. Just has the general aesthetic of a dress. You could also give her Mega Gardevoir, and both would work. Next up being Tinkaton, because it's cute, and also packs hell of a punch with a giant weapon that is comically large compared to them. Next up is Appleton to represent Haru's gardening abilities and passion for gardening. Since it's an apple, it's also sweet. Of course, also having a Grapploct to represent her showtime with Makoto. I don't know, I associate that more with Haru than Makoto for some reason. Next being Palafin, since it's cute on the outside and surprisingly strong on the inside. Again, Haru looks incredibly cute and is somehow like the most vicious Phantom Thief. I don't know how. She'd commit murder. I honestly would not be surprised if that were to have happened at some point. With Beware being here for the exact same reasons. Of course, these are just my ideas for the core Phantom Thieves. What are your guys' thoughts? And if this video does well and you guys want to see more, I'd be happy to cover the Persona 4 cast or some of the social links from Persona 5 with the missing Phantom Thieves I did not cover. Aside from P5X, I refuse to acknowledge that game past this conversation. If you enjoyed the video and want to hear me talk more about RPGs, please consider subscribing since it really helps out a ton. Bye!